Hello and welcome to Discover Energy Work. Today we have Ken Keach. I'm Richard Wickes. I'm here every week interviewing different people. And Ken is somebody that you hear on those talk shows, and he doesn't need an introduction. Well, honestly, Ken's introduction is so big. He's got so much experience. It'd probably take us, most of the show to go through it. I'm very, very lucky to know Ken, and I consider him one of my Chiang Mai friends. And every time I talk to him, I feel like, I'm just, there with somebody with a great deal of information, knowledge, and somebody who's really dedicated a lot of time into path of energy work and so on. And so, first of all, for everybody at home, wherever you are on the train, or welcome, Ken, to Discover Energy Work.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. And you've got this enormous background, which is why I wanted to invite you on the show. You're very, very kind to come. I don't really know where to start to introduce you, but I mean, would you dare to give yourself a small introduction for the people at home?
I've had an interesting life, and usually it depends on which audience I'm talking to as to what I bring forward. I grew up on a cattle ranch with a father who was a professor of agriculture, a ex-university professor of animal husbandry, a colonel in the US Army, and a counterintelligence agent. So I had the normal village life of growing up in a German village in Wisconsin. And then went on to study international business and economics. And because I didn't really care about the Vietnam War, I also got a degree, did the work for Sykes, Soc and Anthro, and then went off and became an international banker and lived and worked in Southeast Asia, Africa, Middle East, ran banks in Japan, Hong Kong. And in all that time, I was always very interested in esoteric things. And you have to understand the local cultures and histories and religions if you're going to work with people in those diverse environments. And so that was always a very long-standing interest of mine since as long as I can remember, in some form or another.
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like it's like the veneer on top is this, I can also say professor at various universities in America, and these experiences with the banking community internationally. But like
I should be careful to say I was in the graduate business school faculties, not a professor. I was an adjunct. So I was teaching the graduate classes, but I wasn't in the tenure track. So I wasn't a professor per se, but for those unacquainted with the American system, sometimes it's easier just to explain the distinction between university teacher and professor is non-existent.
Right. I wanted to, thanks for clearing that up. I wanted to actually go back to, because we sat down in a coffee shop in Chiang Mai and talked about your background being so enormous in the esoteric, but where could we start? Where can this podcast, which is kind of like the beginners, discover energy work in so many ways to help people understand their own experiences and feel like they have a community. But you were telling me that you had a very, very early experience where you could say it was a kind of awakening experience. I think you're saying it was when you were about 6. Can you tell everybody a little bit about that? Would that be okay?
Oh, sure. When I was in the summer between kindergarten and first grade, I picked some plants I was allergic to and died, and did my Elizabeth Kubler-Ross near-death, or actually death plus long coma experience, in which I saw innumerable things on the other side that were extremely intelligent and kind and loving, and forever changed my view of the world and what was there. But those things didn't agree with the extreme fundamentalist rural agricultural view that I got in Wisconsin. And so I spent much of my early life trying to search libraries to find things and studying Egyptians and Incas and Aztecs and anybody else I could think of, such as that was available back in the 1950s and early 60s, which wasn't much, to try to reconcile what I knew was true from the doctrinal malarkey that was being shoved down my throat as part of my culture.
How does one, as a 6-year-old, being given access to this like mind-blowing, view? I mean, maybe some parents are out there, they've got a 6-year-old that's coming back from a near-death experience and saying things. I mean, how did people deal with you? Did you talk about the experience? Did you share your experience?
You know, memory is a little faded now that I'm 75 years old, but generally I remember I didn't talk to people about it very much because I quickly got the download that they didn't want to hear it and it didn't make sense to them, and you were in danger of being classified as delusional. So when you're growing up in a Calvinistic world, that sort of thing, you used to get witches burned and people, people thrown to the Inquisition. So really, I knew these things to be true, and I searched for them in American Indian traditions and other things. But basically, it was something I knew and used as kind of a compass or a gyroscope to focus the rest of my life, besides my interest in business and economics and those things, which came from growing up in the village of Kohler, which had one of the longest and deadliest labor strikes in American history. So when I went to university, I studied business, but I studied personnel and industrial relations, which was the culmination of social sciences applied to business. But I'd grown up on cattle ranches, buying and selling cattle and traveling all over rural Wisconsin, doing that with my uncles and family. And so I had an economic interest and a side of me that was very practically oriented, as you have to be if you're running a cattle ranch. And then there was this other part, which was also true, but I found no disconnect between the two, but I found most of my life people who were a part of when I was teaching meditation or esoteric studies for the Theosophical Society or the Anthroposophical Society. I usually didn't start by introducing that I had business degrees and was a banker, because they would have thought, huh? And I certainly guarantee you that while sitting in bank meetings, I certainly didn't discuss esotericism, although I might explain local religions and cultures to people so that we could do some negotiation if I had other Yanks along with me or Brits while working for Hong Kong Bank or Barclays. Right.
It's and again, that's sort of what we're interested in, is this as you get to know energy work, you realize there's this whole secret life that you have, and there's not much that you can do, because if you start talking to people about it, I think you've got one brick short of a load.
There's an ever-increasing consciousness coming into the world. What used to be highly unusual is now part of normal conversations in America, and I find relatively increasing in Europe and elsewhere. So what was once oceans apart is now more mainstream, and that's good. As more people try to improve themselves and embrace energy work and find solutions for the millions of years of karma and wrong understandings that have been incorporated into our lives, our cultures, our minds, we can find these tools which can enter the subconscious, the very thing that Freud and Jung and everybody else was telling you had to heal, because that controls the human mind. We think, by the way we're trained and schooled in the West, that it is our logic and brain that's working. But that's a very late development in the evolution of animal species, and only humans really have that huge frontal cortex where that does anything. So what they don't realize in most cases is that most of our decisions are made by impulse, instinct, or we just know it's right. And that may have the wrong information or downloads. And until modern psychology, or unless you had esoteric Buddhist studies or esoteric Sufi studies, there wasn't any really way to get to that stuff. They just slapped you side of the head and told you to, straighten up and fly straight, or join the Marine Corps and get tough, or, go read your Bible, whether you're going to go to hell if you didn't change whatever was bothering you. So thank goodness we live in the age we do. But it's important that we do this energy work and bridge those gaps. And as you were alluding to when you began, there are many pathways to do that. The problem is discerning which ones are honest, because there's a lot of snake oil salesmen, and there's a lot of people who don't know what they're talking about. But there's also huge, now Freud really developed his work about 115 years ago, and the Buddhists have been working on it for about two millenniums. So, you can go pick different schools to try to enter into these realms of knowing and change and systems work to make your life better. Because we all have about, most of us will find as we do it, we keep running into the same problems time and time again. We have about 6, 8, 12 holograms in our head of reality that we've gotten from various sources. And you can use these kinds of works to change those, but otherwise you just keep manifesting it, perhaps more subtly as you do your work, but it takes a long time to get the orbit to get smaller and smaller until you achieve a pretty good degree of ever better mental health and subconscious decisions.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I wanted to share a story actually about meeting you, because first I met you in Butter is Better. So I met you, so shout out to Butter is Better in Chiang Mai. I met you in Butter is Better, and we had this brief conversation. I said, well, I'd love to talk to you, just chat with you, and we made friends. Although I said, you got to come on my show, you got to come on Discover Energy Work. But the day before I met you for the first time to chat about this, I woke up in the night and I thought a bomb had gone off. I'm not a bomb, but the power transformers when they blow a fuse, the street ones, it sounds like cannons just shot something. And I jumped up in bed what's just happened? And it was very strange. I looked outside, checked the lights. There's no problem with the electricity. So, well, maybe there's been a fuse blown somewhere. And then I went back to sleep. It happened again. Yeah. And I'm convinced that it was because, your energy vibration was working with me already. So it was helping me with something on a consciousness level. This is something that I think people don't really consider, that before you meet somebody, even your whole energy kind of prepares you for that meeting, don't you think?
The more that you do meditation and work on yourself, the greater the incidences of synchronicity where stuff lines up. I liken it for a visual to when you watch really competent surfers doing those Hawaiian waves. They're standing there looking effortlessly, flowing through this stuff, and are just scooting along with this huge tsunami pushing them forward that you think would otherwise crash you. If you look behind you, you'd go, oh my God, how did I get here? But yes, that increasingly happens as you progress in this kind of work. But and I might add, it's in a good direction, although on some occasions, the change is sufficient because you needed that motivation, that it may take you a year or two to look back and go, oh, now I know why I like this. Because at the time you think, I didn't volunteer for this. But yeah, it's always good. The more you do, the better it gets.
That's something. So something I wanted to sort of raise with you, because I could see us talking for a number of episodes about different areas, because you've just got this amazingly broad background. But something that I'm interested in is helping people, and ideally, you know, helping them by some self-help method so they can help themselves. You know, the best thing is instead of giving a man a fish, teach him how to fish, and then you fed him for his life. Whereas you give him the fish, you've given him a meal. I'm not really sure how to broach it with you, but I feel that somebody with your background probably got quite a lot of experience with self-help. And as you say, there is a lot of snake oil out there.
I've really sort of seen things in, for lack comes to mind, in three dimensions. One, the Buddhists talk about you've got to have skillful means. You've got to get your own life in order through discipline and whatever to get some kind of income and some kind of habits and things that allow you not to be adrift. And that usually starts in life with defining what are your values, not the kind your Boy Scout troop or your mom or your church told you, but what are your values? And then the more those line up with then the next step is saying, what are your goals, so that you know where you're going? Because there's that old saying, if you have a why, you can get through any how. And that helps line up that part of the compass to true north, to your guiding stars. And then there's the psychological and the spiritual. And those things have to be in balance. You can begin to do different types of work with qualified therapists, hypnotherapists, energy workers, whatever, to get your demons lined up, addressed, discovered, put light upon, however you want to say it. And then there's spiritual practices, something as simple as you can just, there's some programs you can download just to ring a Tibetan bell every minute or every half a minute or whatever. And every time it bongs, you just remember to bring your breathing and your thinking back to some place in your head, your nose, your breathing. Or, you know, some you just concentrate on breathing. There's Silva Mind Control as sort of the granddaddy of all of these systems, whatever. That's one I remember first learning before I studied other places in Asia. All of those things are good to discipline the mind, to change its frequency, to clean it up, to be able to get you to places where the improvement can occur. And those things have to be in balance. If you do, not using the word in the derogatory sense, but I had lots of friends who were hippies, but they didn't have the discipline in some of these other parts of their life. They were wonderful, kind, very sensitive souls, but they couldn't move the reality of things around them very far because they were too far out there in many regards, lovely as they were and inspiring as they were. So the point is, and I've met lots of bankers and accountants and other people who live in golden cages of their own making with such levels of wealth and unhappiness as to be really pathetic. So until you're going to get this in a relative degree in balance, or the Japanese would say, study the middle way, or as Franz Kafka says, find all truth is paradoxical. You've got to find that balance point. And these are the work that you're doing and others is what causes that to help people manifest it by the help of a coach. You know, one of the funny things I found, particularly when I was first starting out trying to explain psychotherapy and other things to people or whatever, I would say to them, well, did you learn how you eat with good manners by yourself? Did you learn how to play football by yourself, soccer, canasta, you know, do mathematics? And I said, well, of course not. We all had teachers. And I said, So why are you saying you don't need a teacher for mental health? Why don't you need somebody to help you look at, examine the play? I mean, you wouldn't try to play football without the coach saying, now let me explain to you how the backfield motion works, or how to run this, how to play cricket. You know, you just don't take the bat and hit somebody with it. You know, but somehow we're supposed to know by historic thinking how to be emotionally and mentally healthy. And I always thought it the great paradox that we can go to college or university or high school and take classes in, quote, communication and learn to speak and conjugate verbs in French or Swahili, but boys and girls don't know how to talk to each other. We don't learn how to reconcile differences. We do not learn how to get in intelligent discussions of conflict resolution. But, you know, you learn the rules of Latin grammar. Oh, that's going to be helpful. I mean, yeah, if you're a Latin scholar, or you still go to Catholic church, but it may be more useful to be able to not get a divorce, or to be able to figure out how to keep friendships. Anyway, side digression there. The terrible importance of ever improving mental health without the stigma attached to it. And now we live in an age where both spiritual and mental health issues can be progressed like never before. But there's also, as my Tibetan friends say, the hardest place in the world to get enlightened is in America, because we have such constant diversion of entertainment, and now in the world of electronics and whatever, people don't know how to find their own mind. You see people when they begin many times to meditate, they're terrified to be alone or talk to themselves, or be in any level of non-communication. And that's because the dark side is trying to break through and talk to them. And you'd think that they were being eaten by the zombies that they like to watch movies about. So it's ever harder, if you don't get down to it, to bridge those gaps. And there's ever more energies to keep you from ever finding yourself.
So can we go to like your first experiences, or how did you like first get on the first class you ever went to, or how that experience like helped you choose your next path, as it were? Because you must have gone, I mean, at the time you were learning, there wasn't so much around.
I think when I trying to find it in books or meet foreign students at university and whatever, but it was kind of like wandering around in the near dark in the woods and trying not to trip, because there just wasn't that many things which weren't part of the tradition in the 60s when I was going to college. There was more awareness politically and socially, but we hadn't really made the gap yet. So I think the first classes I took was Maharishi's chanting class in Japan when I was there.
Right.
And at the same time, I was studying Aikido with a Shinto priest and learning Shinto healing. And they were doing marvelous things. And I remember being shocked in kind of a sense of validation, because this old duffer who was in his 80s, people in the Aikido classes, people would attack him, you know, with their moves or whatever. He wouldn't even touch them. He would just use light energy and bounce them all around. And when you saw it, you kept thinking, you know, is this some sort of magician act or whatever? But once you experienced that energy, you went, oh, okay, now I understand there's a there. And that was very helpful. And that was like 1972. And then I went, probably the most significant class I ever took was from a wonderful fellow called Bob McChesney in Seattle, Silva Mind Control, because that's sort of the granddaddy of all of the how do you use meditation in its different aspects, because you can use meditation just for calming, for insights, for healing, for communicating with others, for prognostication. So once you discover the array of things that exceed beyond what our Western society or our normal sciences tell us, You run in, for those in the West, we study philosophy thinking we're going to find existential answers or whatever. But there are just opinions to be had. You can learn you can learn what logical sentences you can put together, whatever, but you don't get answers. And the sciences will teach you stuff that works with the physical world, but you can't get the esoteric or the existential questions answered in those items, although you can learn values and approaches. So you need to find, you don't need to, if you wish to, you can find answers that you can validate once you learn to use your mind at a different level. And it takes a while, because when you first start doing it, it's like trying to watch all of the TV channels at the same time. You can't tell fact from fiction from whatever. But eventually, through the help of training teachers, you can pick up the channels or the vibe or whatever you want to call it that carries the information. And that's the ones that will give you more guided and appropriate and truly valid insights that you can then check out in a more scientific fashion. Nice. By saying, okay, I see this. Does it really happen or work? If yes, proceed. If not, go back to go and don't collect $200 kind of thing.
Because you were in Kobe learning, is that right? Or learning Aikido in Kobe? From
yes.
the Shinto priest. And was it pretty much like you're thrown in and just see if you swim? It was not so much was explained to you. It's like, do these moves and just follow what we're doing.
It's the funny thing about life. When you're starting out and looking forward, it makes no sense. You're just going down this alley and that alley. And, when I talk to my children, and it sometimes is like, but when you look at it from the age I am now, it's absolutely linear. It's like, oh, well, all made sense. From here to there, I can now draw a straight line backwards. But from the other side, you would think you were spinning in a spin dryer as you try to make sense of it. So I would say that all of those things were just steps along the way. And as you became ready, things revealed themselves. And as your mind and heart felt you wanted to get the next thing, there was just all kinds of stuff showing up that it's just been a wonderful life. It's helped me amend myself in ways that I can definitely say I certainly feel improved for the time I've spent in this lifetime.
And well, I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? If you can find something which, I think if any of us can find something which helps us feel better about our lives, and then helps us deal with certain things in our lives, it's got to be so worth it. And it's also so, I think, as you say, it's becoming more mainstream, but it's so sort of out of mainstream. And then, but what I was kind of alluding to with talking about the Asian approach with the Aikido is what I was wondering if it was more, how can I say, implicit. And then when you go to learn like silver mind control, it goes, do this, you'll get this result. If you don't get this result, you can expect this result. If you don't get that, you might want to check your fundamentals or whatever. It's kind of like the same thing, but like totally taken from a different point of view.
Yeah. Paradoxically, I would say that having been and studied in India and Japan and Hong Kong and a lot of other places with various teachers, it's actually easier when the teachers come to the USA, because they're delivering in most cases a more condensed, understandable approach for Westerners, as opposed to cleaning the latrines for 2 years before they tell you the first damn thing, and being a chela or a student before they reveal the truth. It's much more like joining, having to working your way up through the ranks of enlisted to officer corps. Whereas when they come to the West, they tend to download more in order to validate their marketing approach or whatever. It's very, perhaps not kind, but I found it was easier to learn, whether it was Tibetan mysticism or Shaolin forms of movement and healing, in Seattle than I did finding them having to dig through the backwoods of the Himalayas or back parts of Japan. Just because those cultures tend to do their training with a long-term commitment and a subordination. And also in Asia, they tend to want you, not that there's a right way or a wrong way, but they want you to join the club forever. Whereas in America, it's much more like, hey, grab some of this, grab some of that. Now you decide what you want. Now there's a good side and a bad side. You can chase phenomenology all over the place. I know people that go to a new seminar every other week. This week it's crystals, the next week it's pyramids, next week it's some form of meditation. You know, they never settle down and get a discipline.
Right.
But I would say, what I would recommend to people is you go into the Baskin Robbins for the first time, never having eaten ice cream, and you go get those little scoops and you say, that one looks good, that one looks good, that one looks good. And then having sampled a few of them, you go, you know, screw these other ones. I'm really into whatever your favorite flavor ended up being after you had a taste. All the time being conscious that, are they trying to get your money from you? Are they trying to draft you into some kind of crazy organization? Or are they delivering the goods? That's where I did on YouTube a thing that introduces the major Western, or not Western, but the major schools of esotericism, East and West. Right. And then there's some links in there that say to people, should you be interested, these are some valid ones that I know of. Not that there aren't a whole load of others that I may not know. But the point is, I've also seen so many other ones where you're kind of like, oy vey, come on, guys, you know, it shouldn't be illegal for you to be talking. So you just got to show discernment, and it's hard until you've been around the block a few times. So I go back to saying, finding teachers like yourself, talking to other people who know, looking at something like YouTube video that I've done or other places, you know, those are good places to start until your instincts tell you to go somewhere. But after a while, you really do need to settle on a practice or a few practices as opposed to just getting lost in the hall of mirrors.
Yeah. And, you know, I'll definitely put a link to that video. I have watched the whole thing. It's great. I mean, it's a good piece of work. You've got who's that wonderful narrator that does all these nature programs? Morgan Freeman. You've got a Morgan Freeman, you know, kind of narration going on there. It's very good. And you spend a lot of time putting it together. I feel that. So we've talked about a little bit about your experience with silver mind control. And does silver mind control actually exist anymore? Has it changed?
It's evolved over time. Historically, when Jose Silva was alive, it was much more pure and was really extremely concerned with helping a lot of people. I gather the opinions of my friends who were Silva teachers that dealt with it over the decades, that it increasingly, as the children took over, became somewhat more commercial and divided into more products. Nonetheless, as a starting point, you can go whatever it does exist all over the world in the major cities. You can find it online. And you can even get some of the stuff on YouTube, but it helps to be with a good instructor that helps you get the attunement to those frequencies. And that helps when you're around other graduates who go back and audit the class again to pick up on what they've learned and what they've done. So yes, the answer is yes, it still exists. Just go find a good teacher. Like with anything, there is within the club the better and the not so great, and just go see how you vibe with who's ever offering the class. I know in London alone, there's like 6 or 7 different teachers.
And interesting topic. If something is becoming more financial, that, as I say, like more maybe commercial, yeah, and it's energy work, I mean, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if an organization has to make money, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
You've got to make a profit to exist and continue. Right. Again, it becomes a matter of how, it's like trying to find, if that old book, Mr. Chips, finding the good teacher that really cares and becomes involved with you in a good way, can be so much more helpful than just getting the general lecture by the prof.
And we've seen many people who've gone down a slippery slope, without mentioning any names, where they've started off with very, very good intentions, and as they've grown and become, I mean, it's like in the Bible Belt, the holiest man, in 5 years he's got some terrible scandal around him. So I think that's
one of the greatest esoteric teachers I know, Dr. Louis Kaiser, who's in California, in Alameda, once said to me, one of the greatest dangers of being a good teacher of these subjects is not getting caught in the guru trap, where because people appreciate you and give you lots of feedback, you start to think you're better than, or you start trying to do things to guide people too much as opposed to show them how to do. It's very seductive in that way.
That is an interesting topic. I mean, we'd call it, I got taught sifu syndrome in Hong Kong, because you've got sifu is the teacher, the guru. And the guru trap, yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I, as a teacher myself, I think I fall into it all the time, because
this happens to anybody when they have success. When you watch people in banking get promoted up the chain of command, there's a point when many times they start thinking they're better than other mortals because they've gotten some good feedback.
Right.
And it's one of the great ego traps. There's that old Greek saying, those whom the gods would destroy, they first make mad. So it's easy to, and the Romans emperors used to, in the early stages, when they would come back triumphant, they would always have their chariot driver whisper in their ear as they were going through their triumphal processions, all is vainglorious, all is death, so that they didn't sort of like start thinking as Caesar did and go mad with power or success.
Yeah, I'd like to refer everybody to Decker Keltner, Professor Decker Keltner at UCLA. He did, I think it's UCLA, he did a lot of work on the power paradox. And I think it's worthwhile for absolutely everybody, because even if in a family, you can be in that a position of power, and it literally changes how the brain works. It's not personal. You're not a failure. It's just you have to be aware that your biology may be taking you down a bit of a road which is not going to be that useful for you in the long term. It's not a sustainable road. Yeah, as you say, that the emperors knew that, the old emperors of Rome, they knew, like, you need to be reminded after a great success, so you're probably going to make a boo-boo.
This is why the nouveau riche, as they test them sociologically, increasingly as people have success, lots of times they become less empathetic because they somehow get the illusion they're better than others. Many of my friends who are successful Republicans seem to think that the world, that they're better than other mortals to the detriment of all.
Yeah, interesting fact, the most powerful thing you can do to increase your own personal power, and power being defined as the ability to influence something, things, people, events, is empathy. So develop your empathy. And of course, on the same side, when you develop your empathy, you get to a certain level of power where the empathy just drops off, and of course, then you're in the trap because you're convinced you're right. So yeah, it's fascinating. It is funny. Anyway, I would like to ask you, sort of in a rounding off kind of way. So if somebody's coming as a beginner and they're coming across a thing that they feel is good, is there any other advice you'd like to give them when they meet that, new thing, or maybe somebody who's just started having phenomena, started having their energetic opening experience? Is there advice that you give them?
I think that many times people have these unusual experiences, and historically, because Western minds and science didn't agree, oftentimes they would end up being given psychotropic chemicals to numb them because they couldn't understand it, or the professional systems weren't competent. That's different than people that truly do have problems, but there is a level sometimes of insights and things that you're fortunate if you can find gifted teachers. I've had the good fortune that there's people like Dr. Rosamond Miller in Palo Alto, California, or Dr. Louis Kaiser, people that I've known throughout my life who are brilliant minds and are more than happy to help people find directions and schools of thoughts or Jessica Lucas in San Jose. These are all people that are just incredibly kind and gifted and have helped thousands of people find pathways that are valid. So there are many people like that. Again, it's sense anybody's integrity, and or you can go in systems like, if you're looking for sort of the vanilla, easy approaches to begin, Silva Mind Control, Rosicrucians, Sufis of the West, there's any number of them that are out there that I list in my video as places for people to start. And then, like anything, it's like getting, go from kindergarten to first grade to second grade to third. And of course, with each step along the way, your discernment and your wisdom gets better. But those are all important steps. And again, finding a good, there's so many different forms of psychotherapy and hypnosis with people who have, go do your research and find people that have a good reputation that aren't weirdos. All of those are great ways to progress yourself and will change your life and eliminate increasingly eliminate the recurring problems that you have and will continue to manifest if you don't address this stuff.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, I'm no doubt I'd like to sort of extend an invitation for you to come back and talk with us again. But thank you so much. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot from listening to your, extremely deep knowledge and broad knowledge.
You're very kind, and I'm happy to be of service if that's of use to you. So thank you very much for the invitation to be here.